How you guys doing today? It's Anthony Gangi. Welcome to another episode of Tier Talk. Guys, we're going to talk about tips for better bottom-up communication. So basically, we just did a video about how management's got to listen more to the front line. But in all fairness, I want to see if we can do a good dialogue today on how frontline can better communicate with management. We have a few tips, but we also want to discuss maybe certain scenarios where it's great to maybe have that dialogue, scenarios where we may not realize it's time to have that dialogue, how to approach that dialogue. And I think it's a fair discussion that we're going to have today because, as I said, if you watched a couple of days ago, we did an episode on what management needs to do to be more effective as leaders. I think now let's do it on the other side and build that balance, which is what can frontline do to communicate a little better with management, just to balance the dialogue out. I'm going to have two guests. I'm going to introduce them shortly, but I want to tell you I have three sponsors. First sponsor is American Military University. If you guys are looking for an online degree, going back to school, try to bring some experience into the classroom, check out American Military University. It's a great school, very supportive of what we do in corrections, very supportive of what we do on Tier Talk. And then we also have Guardian RFID. So Guardian RFID, from inmate tracking and cell checks to cloud-based business and artificial intelligence, Guardian RFID digitally transforms jails, prisons, and juvenile detention facilities of every size. Visit guardianrfid.com for more information. And guys, we do have videos on that as well. So check out Guardian RFID because you'll see some of our videos there. And we also have Shea USA. Shea USA is the world's leading weapon, cell phone, and contraband detection system manufacturer for corrections. For more information, contact Joe Vasquez at 440-561-7615. He's a subject matter expert. He's passionate about our industry, and he will take good care of you guys. And don't forget, Inmate Manipulation, Decoded. It's on the market. It's available on Amazon. And I have my other book. It's going through the process of being published now. So we got a few months, but that should be out shortly. So we have two guests. Let me bring in Connie, Alleyne. Connie should be excited because Monday we are going to have a live, and we're going to talk about Connie's journey, talk about her book, and just try to get an understanding of how does a woman become successful, go from corrections to business. And the audience, myself, I can't wait to hear the story. Connie, of course, we love you, and my audience wanted to see this. They wanted me to have you come on, and I think it's a great idea. I know we've done it before, but I think it would be great just to have that live interaction with the new audience that has joined the channel. But Connie, do you mind introducing yourself, please?
Sure. Hi, everybody. I am Connie Alleyne. I am the founder and president of the Civilian Corrections Academy. I'm also the podcast host of The Fly Behind the Wall and the author of The Cage Was Her Cocoon. Thank you for having me, as always. I'm excited to be here and certainly looking forward to this conversation.
Yeah, I think this is going to be fun. And we also have, he's a retired assistant deputy commissioner from Massachusetts. We have Butch Ferreira. Well, it's James Ferreira. Do you prefer Butch?
I do prefer Butch.
All right, Butch. Butch, do you mind introducing yourself, Butch?
Butch Ferreira, 35, almost 36 years in the Massachusetts Department of Correction. I started as a correction officer and eventually retired as an assistant deputy commissioner of the Northern Sector. Very, very, happy to participate in this discussion. I think it's very important, and I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, we're happy to have you. So real quick, guys. So please pay attention to the dialogue because, as I said, any way that we could enhance bottom-up or top-down communication really does help the agency 100% because communication brings about understanding, and understanding hopefully brings about value in what each of us do. Now, obviously, we know that when management communicates with staff, probably the most familiar communication that we get from management may be dealt with through, I think Butch was saying it before, post orders, policies. What are other ways that management may try to communicate with staff?
So, yeah, I thought that staff, like you say, the information flows both ways. But on most occasions, on a day-to-day, a lot of the information is passed in writing, whether it be post orders, policy, procedure, or some other document that gives some direction or transcribe some ideas, the direction that the facility or agency is going in. But there's a number of different ways that we have to communicate both ways. I think roll call before each shift is pretty common throughout the country. Training and staff development classes is another effective way that we communicate both up and down the chain of command. Supervisory meetings that are held periodically, whether they're first line supervisors or captains and lieutenants and some of the entry level manager positions. Today with technology, we jump back into the document or in writing, email, and some other technological advancements that we've had. And I think some of the most important ways for staff to participate and for communication to go both up and down the chain of command is the in-person administrative rounds on all three shifts and touring the facility, not only to speak with the staff, but the inmates alike.
Yeah, and I think what's good, guys, is I want you to know something. There are stuff that's automatic that we do just to keep the facility running, but there is stuff that we have to do that's intentional, and that would be like the management walking around, basically ways where we can be intentional with trying to get that face-to-face, bring back some of the human element. Now, before we start, I'll go with Connie first. I want to make something clear. Open door policy versus chain of command. Yes, we may work in a military-like structure. I get it. And management may be at that point where it's like, well, you can't communicate with us because that's violating the chain of command. It's not. Open door policy is not meant to circumvent chain of command. It's just meant to build a connection, So I mean, there are times when, yes, you could go to management. We'll get to that, and you could talk about your concerns directly. And I'm sure that will be when they're walking around, whatnot. But there are also times when you could interact, and hey, how's your day, Joe? Going good. How's your day, Aunt? Going well. And that's not breaking chain of command. That's just being human, interacting. And I think what works well is that seeing the person outside of the position, because at the end of the day, it is a people business. It is about building relationships, and you have to find time to see people outside of their position. Because I think that if you see someone outside of their position and kind of know who they are, you can trust them more in the position, if that makes sense. But Connie, I know you worked in some tight structures. Connie, how would you differentiate the open door policy versus chain of command?
Sure. So for me, open door policy means that if something's going on, you've got something personal happening, you can come in and talk to me. It's not to say like I don't have things to do, right? Like, I think as an administrator, my calendar was probably always packed, right? But I was intentional about leaving space for just random conversation, right? Because you just never know what people need when they come in. But when they come in and the need is work related, and there's somehow, it feels like there's a circumvention of like the process, it's on me to redirect that person to the right person they should be speaking to, right? So chain of command should probably always sort of be in the back of the mind, but, open door policy means I'm approachable. If you want to come and talk to me, I am open to you coming to talk to me. It doesn't mean that, you need an appointment every single time, right? I think when there's a formal discussion that needs to be had, yes, you would probably need to set up an appointment so we carve out time to give your concern the time and attention needed to navigate it. However, if you're just coming to kind of shoot the breeze and we're building relationship with each other, that's very different. You're muted.
Ah, damn it. I had a good sentence right at the beginning. It said, I love what you were saying, Connie, but I guess there's no sense in me saying it now, because I was muted. So where was I? No, I'm serious. I love what you were saying, Connie, because I agree. I think that building a relationship matters, but you're right. If you have someone coming up and you're in a high position, the last thing you want to do, because sometimes in your position, you're a little removed from what's happening down there, and you don't want to make promises that they're going to hold you to without filtering those promises through the experts that will know if those things can actually be carried out. So I agree with you 100%. You really got to kind of, hey, I know you want to mention that, but do me a favor. Can you bring it up to your people? And if they think it's where they'll bring it up to me, because the last thing I want is to go ahead and make changes or make promises that, it may not fit with the people in that area. But I do want to mention something. There is still time to have that dialogue, and we'll explain. It's just not meant to happen during that open door policy part of it all. So you'll see what we mean by that. I think when we say open door policy, it's more passive. Maybe I'm in my office and someone comes by and wants to say hi, okay, hey, what's up? How you doing? Hey, how's the family? Blah, blah, blah. And not, hey, I can't talk to Gangi. He's in his office today and he's too far up to want to talk to me anyway. No, we don't want that. But that's more of a passive approach. But there will be, when we discuss the dialogue later, more of an active approach by management where we do want the front line to talk to us directly so we could see what the concerns are. But I just wanted to express the open door policy being more of a passive approach, not wanting people to not come up to us. I think is foolish because we want to know who our people are. But real quick, does that make sense to you, James, what I'm trying to say, or Butch?
Yeah, even Gangi, if they come to see you, I always felt confident that if people had real issues, they knew who to go see. I always felt that when a staff member had a real issue that was significant and serious, they would come see me because they knew that it was real and, I was going to be able to address the issue. There were some folks, and like Connie said, I would redirect folks. I'll give you a good example of that institution. As a deputy warden, someone may come about his assignment, his working assignment is. I had a standard answer. I don't make out the roster. That's the captain's job. Your issue is with him. Now, if there was something more, then that was the opportunity to elaborate. But, if the captain said no, why would I interfere with the captain trying to run his shift or her trying to run her shift? So I think that came with experience as well. The longer and the more, exposure you had to those type of issues. I didn't want to do, I had enough to do. I didn't really want to do anybody else's job. And I don't know how that sounds coming over the but it was hard enough being a prison administrator, doing our jobs to start doing everyone else's job.
Yeah, and I like what you said there too, James, because the thing is this, it's like, yes, I do got a captain. So, I get there is case-by-case scenarios. But again, you really got to exhaust the measures before you get to that administrative side. Have you gone through the sergeant? Have you gone through the lieutenant? Have you gone through the captain? Have you gone through, whatever those ranks are before you jump this level? Because obviously, by you just jumping the level, the problem is once you open up that door, it's going to keep coming, not just from that person. Now you have supervisors that have no power because I know for a fact I could just circumvent them anytime I want because I got Butch who's going to do whatever I need. And guys, that kind of parallels a little bit to, let's say I'm walking in a unit and I'm a supervisor and an inmate decides to go around the officer after an officer gave him a legit order and come to me. Now, if I go ahead and give the inmate what they want, what did I just do to the officer? I got rid of their power. I got rid of their perception of authority. So my job is to what? Tell the inmate, you got to deal with the officer. It's their house. There's, if that's what they told you to do, that's what you got to do by. So again, following the chain of command, just that same ideology, once we open up that door, every time we allow someone to go around their immediate supervisors for really no just cause, just because I can, it circumvents the authority of the supervisors on the floor that, need to have that perception of authority, especially because you have emergencies that occur. And last thing we want is for them to be questioned in the moment when you really need their authority to be followed. So there's a couple of things we want to mention first, but I do want to talk about, kind of piggyback off of what we just talked about the open door. I do want to talk about management by walking around a little bit. And, what does that mean for management? What is management looking to do? And then when they're doing it, what should the front line be doing? Now, before I get to Connie, I want to mention management by walking around has to be done in today's world. They want to see you. Now, with that said, it's funny because some people will be like, well, why, management never walks around. Then when they do, why are they here? And it's like, when we're walking around, it's supposed to set up for open communication with us and those on the floor. Now, this is a moment where, you get to know the specific concerns and then you bring it back because you're trying to get an understanding of what's happening on the floor on the most immediate level. the level where innovation comes. So we want to be out there, we want to be interacting, and then we want to bring stuff to the table and filter it through our resources, our direct connections. But Kai, let's talk about management, Walker. How important is that today, and what are we looking to do? What are we looking to accomplish? Both sides.
So I think it's important to be visible, right? Simply just that, right? You like how you don't want to be that leader who is untouchable and we never see you, right? Like, because yes, we know you have the authority that's inherent in your title, but like when there's no connection, you know, are we really just following you, or are we following directives, right? Like, because I think that there's a distinction in what makes you that leader, right? And so the walking around, for me anyway, was my way of building relationships, letting people know who I am, and to neutralize that, oh my God, why is she on the floor, right? Because it doesn't have to be an anomaly. I walk around every Monday, Wednesday, right? Like if that's what I do, that's what I do. So there's no big deal about me walking around unless there's a situation where like we're investigating something, or like I'm walking with the security dep or something, like something seems a little off. So people are like, okay, this is different from her usual walking around. But I think what walking around allows us to do is also to see some of the things in action that some of the staff might be complaining about, right? They're complaining about X, Y, Z, but I've never seen how come meds take 5 hours, right? I've never seen how come, you know, we need an officer at the end of Medline as well as the middle of Medline, because the line is so freaking long, diversion could be happening at any point, right? Like, but if I've never seen it personally, I don't really know the details on why I need to advocate for this issue that the staff keeps bringing up, right? And for me, that happens to be one of the ones that we dealt with, right? And what happened? I was able to go talk to the warden. Hey, listen, this is what we're having the issue on Medline. This is where we're seeing diversion happen. And he's like, okay, well, I'm going to assign another officer to do meds with you guys, right? And it was just that simple. But when you're not close to the front line and you're not connecting to some of the issues that they're bringing up, and you're not seeing firsthand how it creates a pain point for them during the day, how it makes the job that much more difficult, you're sending, like, I think, different messages. Sometimes they think you just don't care, which is why you're not coming out to see what's going on. Sometimes they think you're just ignoring it, right? Like this isn't something she wants to deal with, so she just, or he's not going to deal with it. But when they see it, it's like, oh, wow, you know, she's listening. You know, they heard the concern. Someone's here to check it out, you know. And I think being intentional about why you're doing those tours, why you're walking the floor, why you're stopping to talk to people along the way, right? Because they also get that opportunity to get to know you. You don't always have people who are going to come and take advantage of your open door policy, right? And so because I might not be that person who's going to come to you, at least now I'm in your space where you feel most comfortable, and you could see that I'm warm, approachable. We can have an easygoing conversation in the moment.
Kai, that was a really good point about you're right. A lot of people aren't going to find their way to admin, or some of them don't work the shifts where admin is there. And I want to mention before we go to Butch, because I know Butch was agreeing with most of the stuff that you were saying, if not all of it. One of the things I want to mention too is that when you're doing the walking around, you have to want to do it, you know, because, you know, you can't see that as work, because if you see it as work and you're already overwhelmed, well, the problem is you're not going to want to have those interactions, because you're going to view the interactions at work. And it's really not. It's about you understanding your facility at what I would like to think the most intimate of levels. So if you're walking around dreading the opportunity to interact with staff to really find out what's happening, then you really shouldn't be in that higher level position, because I think, to me, that is probably your main function. You know, your main function is to have that interaction at the most intimate of levels and to bring the concerns up with you, because you are going to be a voice for the higher level concerns, you know. So, you know, for the stuff that you can't handle, obviously, you know, for the stuff that has to be passed up. But there are some people that just don't want to walk around. And to me, that's already going to set up for a negative interaction when you do have a chance to interact with staff. But you look at staff as like, well, no, this guy's just bothering me. It's going to be more work to my table. And, you know, at that point, why are you even walking around for? Hey, Butch, what's your thoughts on what was said?
So this isn't a knock on anyone, but so when I started in corrections in 1986, and I'm not sure I ever saw the warden inside the units in when I was a correction officer working a post. I don't think I ever saw the deputy warden come to my unit or my post and say, "Hey, how's it going?" or "How's things going?" or making an administrative round. And I think it was evolution, right? Things evolved where the the best practice in corrections was for administrators to get out and about. Now, I can tell you that, as you both know, it's a very, very difficult profession. Overworked, couldn't find a minute, to do some of the things. When I got so tired of the administrative duties, one of my favorite things to do was to get out and walk around. It was refreshing. It recharged my batteries. I thought, even when I thought we were snake bit some of the times and we were having some difficult issues, even with maybe even labor management, when you got out and talked to everyone, it was kind of refreshing. And I don't know how it was for the other folks on the other end talking to me, but what I will say is, it became a matter of routine for all of us. And I do agree with you, Gange, when you say, what's he doing here? Or, geez, he's out in the yard a lot, isn't he? But that went away when they got to know you, and the more you were out there, they kind of started to trust you a little bit about, hey, he's just doing his job. And it was an opportunity for people to say, hey, Butch, what about this? What about that? What do you think about this? And being a correction officer and starting in the agency in which I retired in, 35, I got to know a lot of people. I started, there was some people when I retired were still correction officers, sergeants and lieutenants. We were COs together, and those folks could certainly come up to me and say, I remember when you were a correction officer, we would have some real personal conversations, and they would pass that along to staff that didn't know the administrators. He may have a mean look, he's very intense when he's walking around, but very approachable if you take the time and the effort to try to approach him. But it was a matter of routine. I also I took those opportunities for walking around to evaluate operations. I always picked something to look at, whether it was sanitation or how Medline was a huge. It's become a prison operation nightmare on many occasions.
Connie knows that. Look at her. Look at
that's all we do sometimes. I feel like we've become.
Don't talk about my Medline.
A 24-hour dispensary, and it impacts programs. People can't get the programs because they're in the Medline. So it was really, you had to. She's laughing. I'm hitting a nerve, I think. But it's powerful to get out and they'll tell you a lot. There's a couple other things that I did too. That was, some people would say you shouldn't do it, or you should do it, or I mixed it up. But I never made a round in SEG as an administrator without the correctional program officer with me and the officer in charge of the unit. I used to make mistakes, go by myself, and it would take me 3 hours to get through the unit with all these complaints and questions. And then when I learned to take the people who had the answers right there was never any questions, and I knew that the people, it could have heard a pin drop when I was walking through there. I knew the people were doing their jobs because the inmates were informed of their status and what they were doing there and when they were eligible to leave. So I did the same thing in the housing units. I would try to take the, maybe the lieutenant or the sergeant with me so that, inmates wouldn't ask me questions just so I would say something that would contradict the sergeant or the lieutenant. But to me, like I said, I thought sanitation was the number one indicator of who was running the place, us or the inmates. I wanted staff to be able to work in clean areas and something that was somewhat sanitized. And I got out there, we got out there, not just me, my staff, and even when I was the assistant deputy commissioner, We tried to get around as many in all three shifts. It was important to see the midnight shift and operations and meet with those people so they don't feel forgotten. But it's hard work. But that was one of the best that was one of the best things to do as an administrator was to actually get out and evaluate operations and see the staff and the inmates.
Yeah, and
Otherwise,
I like it. I like what you're saying, Butch, because to be honest with you, what's good sometimes is we have to make some of the shittiest decisions because it's our job. That's what we have to hold people accountable. And if you don't show your face, all they'll see is the position. And when you have to make a decision that sucks, if they don't really know who you are, all they see is the position making the decision. But if you walk around and you have to make a decision, which sucks, but you have to hold somebody accountable or remove somebody, God forbid, but if it happens, they see the individual and there's a trust in what it is that you're doing, where if you're up top and you're kind of anonymous technically, then every time you make an effort to hold somebody accountable, even if it's the right thing, they don't know you. They don't know who you are as a person.
And it makes it easy for the generalized animosity to set in.
You know what? Then let's get. Hey, you know what, Connie? Why don't we? Because that was the thought that you brought up before. So let me just add one thought because I'd like you to get into that. So basically, if the staff get to know who you are, it does help when you have to make those tough decisions, and it makes its way down to the front line, and then they're thinking like, you know what? If they don't know you, you're just an asshole. What is he doing? I don't get it. But if they do, sometimes it's like, you know what? I know Butch. I know Connie, because I and Connie, and we all know this, guys, we have to make decisions. And sometimes we can't tell you, especially when it comes to those accountability because of investigations and liability, all this other stuff. We can't tell you why we had to do something or what exactly it is that we saw. And sometimes people twist it and say, I can't believe you let go of this person because all they did was this. No, that's all they told you they did. And if that's all they did, we wouldn't have let them go. So I like when you're a good administrator and when you have to hold somebody accountable because it's going to happen, they go ahead and say, wow, he must have really or she must have really did something wrong for Butch or Connie or Gangi to have taken that level. And again, that does come through that interaction, especially by management, by walking around. But Connie, can you explain more about the that generalized animosity?
Yeah, because when they don't have like a name or a face with the title, they don't have a relationship with that title, it just becomes the title, right? And then it's like, it's easier to sort of say like, oh, the freaking officers, right? Or that damn lieutenant or the lieutenants, right? It becomes everybody. And that one situation where there was a tough decision that had to be made, no one really knows all the details or the driving factors for that decision, but they just know that the administrator did it, right? And so it's easy to make the administrator the scapegoat in that situation. And then it's like all administration, this is what they do to us, right? Like, and I feel the more that you get out there and you get to know your people, you let your people get to know you, the less that they're able to just generalize. Because I've had situations, this nurse did this thing and they're like, listen, go talk to Connie. Connie's not going to just send you up the river, right? Like, and I think it's just the relationship knowing like, I'm going to do the due diligence. I'm going to sit with custody. I'm going to go through the security tapes. It's all the stuff that goes on behind the scenes that most people don't know is happening. And if they know you as an individual, they know that you're going to try to be fair. You're going to be objective. You know the policies. You're not just making decisions on a whim because you're administration, right? Or because someone's just telling you what to do. I think sometimes people may want to detach us from the fact that we do have the ability to make some decisions, right? We do have some authority in our spaces and we do have opinions. We can speak up if in fact there's something for us to speak up about. But if in fact you did something that you should be walked out for, Connie's not going to speak up on your behalf. I'm going to be part of the team walking you out because that's what I got to do. So we just got to get to that space where we aren't generalizing and we understand that here's what we need to get done. So, walking, what did you write there? Oh my God.
I try to talk to Connie, but she always tells me she's busy working the Medline. Guys, I'm talking about now. She's no longer in there. And every time, hey, Connie, what are you doing? I'm working the Medline. But I thought you were interested.
I'm counting sharps.
I always say you guys walk the walk, boy. I'll tell you, that is dead on in prison. Medlines.
Oh my God.
But Connie, you're right, because Connie, that a lot of that divide that we're talking about, you know, and I just want to, it might cross into something else, but it really comes on the assumption, you know, on how we feel that department is, because maybe I don't like Connie, so now it's easy for me to generalize it out to medical or management because Gangi represents admin. But if I could maybe go back to you, Connie, on one more thing, when we're having that management by walking around, right, and we're trying to get that interaction with staff. Now, mind you, what's good about this is when management does the management by walking around, they have to allow themselves time. It has to be scheduled, and you have to give yourself that effort. Unless there's an emergency, this is your time to walk around. So you don't want to do it as a last minute. You really want to schedule a good block, and then this way you can really focus on your staff without having to worry about a meeting you got to go to in about 10 minutes, because this cannot be rushed, all right? And the good thing about it is if you're not overwhelmed by a time constraint, it allows you to talk to staff without feeling overwhelmed, because the last thing you want to do is get so caught up in time constraints or being overwhelmed that staff is not a priority when they should be a priority. But now with that said, when you have the time and when you're going around, how should staff frontline now approach the admin walking around? And guys, if you're a supervisor, bear with me on this, because this is the moment for the front line to have that communication. So there should be nothing personal with the officers stating concerns to management, because in the end, it should help out the running of the entire facility. But how should front line make that approach to a manager who is walking around? Should they notify their supervisor first, or is this really just for them to have that direct interaction?
I mean, I think it's direct, informal interaction. I mean, it should be a professional conversation, unless we cool, right? Like if we friends, like it's you can just come be like, hey, Connie, let me tell you what happened today, you know, or let me tell you what's going on in the back, right? Like that's a very different from, you know, Miss Alleyne, here's what was going on, and you're trying to give me all the facts so that I can kind of really see where you're coming from. Like I would just imagine, like, I don't know how many people are going to say, hey, Butch, let me tell you what's going on, unless we have that kind of relationship, right? Like, then it's okay to come at me in this informal space because I'm walking around, and we're just going to try to, if we can work something out on the fly, great. And if it's something I need to take back, I should be able to communicate that to you in the moment. But I think sometimes some staff may be very passionate about something, or maybe very upset, or maybe in the heat of the moment of something, because you never know what you're walking into. And sometimes you receive the brunt of that unintentionally, right? Like, I mean, I think that I've had someone who was like in the midst of something yelling at somebody, and they came at me with a very strong tone. I'm usually very mild mannered, and I took a step back, right? Like it was almost like, are you talking to me right now? Right. Like, and it almost made them pause for a moment. Right. Like, because then they had to kind of catch themselves in order to adjust that tone in the conversation and all that other stuff. But I think it really is a matter of being able to read the situation. You got a relationship with this person or not. And even if you don't, they're approachable, but you want to be professional. That way, nothing else gets lost, right? You don't want whatever your concern is to get lost in the fact that you are rude, or that you are using expletives, or that whatever, right? Like you don't want your concern to get lost in the smoke of whatever.
Yeah, you know what's powerful about that, Connie, too, because kind of crosses into the being the professional. I want to mention something before we go to Butch real quick. So one of the reasons why I used to walk around, it's not, I would like to do a lot more walking around. I'm guilty of it right now. I work in a facility that's just, it's got a lot of movement going on. And when you're in an admin position, you require staff to walk around, and it's not that easy to get staff because they're tied up. We're a little understaffed right now. So I find my time to definitely interact with staff. In my office, they can always come down or come up, or when I come in, I definitely say hi to everybody when I come in. But at our facility, we can't walk around without being escorted, and that takes staff. And And right now, staff is so tied up and stuff that sometimes when you go down there, there's not enough staff. So you wind up already being a burden, and you don't want to go down with that. You want to, try to, go when, it doesn't overwhelm anybody. But I am guilty because, again, we're understaffed right now, and it's just trying to find time. But when I do like to walk around, what I do like to do is I'm a big fan of trying to push authority down, So like a lot of times people push information up, but I think there's a lot of things that when you walk around, you could say, well, why am you even calling me for this? It seems like you're more than capable to solve it on your own. So I think every time you go to walk around as a manager, you should look for things that you can empower your staff to do, instead of them always coming to you. Maybe there's certain things as you're walking down, you know what, why do we have a lieutenant involved in that? It looks like this officer could definitely handle that. Why are we, pushing all this up, and we should be pushing authority down? So I think a good part of it is empowering the staff as you're walking around in areas where you feel that they can be empowered. But the other thing I have too is the reason why I'm saying that is when you are a frontline professional and there's a chance to interact with that management during walking around, it really can't be, I know this may sound crazy, guys, but it really can't be a vent for things that we really have nothing to change. We could shoot the breeze, don't get me wrong, and you can maybe get a perspective, but at the end, we still have a job to do. So we want to make the time useful. Sometimes people will vent, but at the end of the day, we just spent 20 minutes and got nowhere. What I would look to do is if there is a concern that can be handled by us, and I think you should know what concerns are in my hands to handle and what concerns aren't, like venting to me about new legislation. I hope you guys can manage how to get it done. Don't get me wrong, because I want to empower you. We delegate the what, empower the how, but I can't change the legislation. So I don't want to spend time talking about 20 minutes of, a legislation that I can't change or control. And me and Butch were talking about most likely the people that could best do that are the unions, because they're the ones that are more connected to the lawmakers. But my job at this point is to carry it out. So if you want to come up with solutions and tell me how you want to carry it out, I love it. We could talk all day because that's practical, and we could do it in the moment. And if you have concerns, let's fix it, because that's a way to empower somebody. Hey, Gage, I know this got passed down. These are the things I would like to do. The last thing we want as management is when we're walking around, we want to hear the concerns, don't get me wrong, but we also want to hear people that have the solutions, because the people that are the best persons to make those solutions are the people that are nearest to the ground, who are the most innovative. So if you have a problem that's really on the carrying of a how that must be done, you're in the best spot to give me the solution. So I would like you to come up with a solution and not more obstacles, because in the end, I want to go down and see the resources, and I'll help you. I'll help you make your life easier if we can get the job done. But the last thing we want as management is to kind of be conflicted with things that I cannot control, that have to happen. And instead of you coming up with how we can get it done, it's just obstacle after obstacle after obstacle on a situation that literally has to get done. And it's tough, because I wish Frontline sometimes would see that there are certain things in the house that, yes, we could make a difference. And management, if you could do it, you should be doing it. But there are certain things that are out of our control, and to kind of hold us responsible for things that we cannot control, I think that's a bit unfair. I do. But again, that's just my perspective. But what's your thoughts on that, Butch?
So sometimes, I think staff just want to be heard. If I can play the part where I'm active listening and they get it off their chest, sometimes that's all they're looking for, right? But then there's other times where they actually want you to, like you say, Gange, like there's legislation, right? In corrections, and I grew up in corrections, and that's all I did. So I don't know what the private sector is like, but there's some of the best delegators up I've ever seen in my life, right? They delegate. If you let them, they'll delegate everything up, right? And you won't be effective because you'll be so busy doing other people's job. So I like what you said about pushing it down, right? There's so many people in between that, get paid to take care of these issues, and you need to push that back down. But when you talk about legislation, that's the big picture, right? That's what central office is worried about, the commissioner. Now there's regulations. Legislators now passed it in the House and the Senate. Now it's law, right? So that's the big picture. Now that's really when the communication has to start, getting to the staff and now they're almost running some of the prisons with legislation, whether it's administrative segregation or what they used to call 100 years ago, isolation or solitary confinement, all of the rules that evolved or changed. That's that's some of the conversation that has to take place. Hey, I wouldn't have signed the law if I was a governor. I wouldn't even have drafted the legislation. But, I used to ask folks, who's your state rep? Who's your senator? Do you even know who that is? Have you ever called them? Have you ever told them, boy, I work in corrections? And so, it just opened up the dialogue and we talked about a lot of different things, but understanding and knowing the big picture of why some of this evolution has taken place. And, it went a long way. And walking around, and when they heard it from you, some of them got tired of hearing us say, it wasn't us, it was the legislature. They changed the laws. Now we got to figure out how to get it done. But those were some of the things. And some of the blame was misplaced. That is true. And I told you today, we had a conversation. I've had discussions with people who were supposed to be in on those conversations, and they didn't do a very good job. And it wasn't just, maybe the legislative rep representing the correction officers. We had a legislative rep in central office. Where were you when all this was taking place? What type of input did we have from correctional professionals? And what can we do to make sure that it doesn't happen again, that they don't just introduce this bill and then it turns into law without any experts taking a look at it? So it was difficult, but it was again, it's a very difficult profession, but getting out and walking around and talking to people and trying to explain to them, one of my biggest, it was a joke actually when people would ask. One of my first things used to say when they would ask me questions, I would say, "What's the policy say?" And people would look at me like, "Well, that's why I'm asking you." I said, "No, I'm asking you to go look it up and find out for yourself. Or if you need help, you read the policy, then come back and see me if you want me to explain it a little bit more." That way, it taught people that there were already resources out there to help yourself. And, like I mentioned earlier, these are some of the things we use to communicate, and people would start to learn the policies and kind of understand why we're doing some of the stuff we're doing, and then they would say, why can't we change the policy? Sometimes we did. Sometimes we did change the policy. We had a process, a protocol to get policy changed. Sometimes we couldn't. Sometimes policy was based on legislation. Sometimes it was based on national standards. But the more people understood how the whole big picture worked, the better they got along. It's complex, but it's a difficult job.
Yeah, and I want to add something. Maybe I get Connie's thought on this too. So just want to kind of go back a little bit. When we walk around, besides the empowerment, obviously what I am looking for is if you can trust staff. And for the most part in my career, I've never had trouble trusting staff. They're my officers, civilians, whatever the case. They're here to do a job. And as I said, a small percentage of the ones that venture and do something foolish. But for the most part, I've never had problem empowering my staff. Never had problem creating momentum to keep the facility moving on its own. Because at the end of the day, that's really what's supposed to happen. And then once in a while, you may have to intervene to get the gears running again. But for the most part, you let it run, you back away. You let it run, you back away. And then that's what we're supposed to do. But in the process, you got to walk around and make sure all the parts are working, whether by themselves or more importantly, when they should be working together. But the thing here is this, guys, is that, I like what James said about the resource. When we go down and we talk, we want to see people that are resourceful. I love when people go to, maybe if there's a concern about policy, they explain why the policy doesn't work from the policy's perspective, as opposed to saying it's not working. Do you know the policy? No, but okay, so you're being resistant right off the fact. Now, when I go down, granted, guys, my job, if I'm able ever to tour, is my job is I got to keep the facility moving in a certain direction, right? So I do like to go down. I like what James said, and you explained why. And I think that matters because why can build a level of investment in people when they understand why I'm doing something. And, me and Connie did a segment in Masco. We brought a puzzle piece, and I agree with James. The bigger picture, where does this piece fit? How does this connect to everybody else? Not just myself, but how does it connect to everybody else that's, involved in the creating of this big picture? More importantly, what am I building? I have no idea what I'm building. So again, the more you're able to tell staff what it is that we're trying to accomplish. But now, with that said, I do want staff, when they know that we have to move forward with something, and it's way beyond us, when we go down and we're interacting and we spend 20 or 30 minutes talking about how we can't do things that have to be done, we just wasted 20 or 30 productive minutes. Because granted, guys, we can always have that dialogue, but in the end, you should know what I can and can't do. And, I can always explain why things can't be done, but it should come on the back effort of an honest try, and I strongly agree with that. Like I have walked around and we were talking about programming, and when I had my social service supervisor, and I really don't talk much about my job yet, but this pertains to the story, so it's not an insult in any way. But when I had my social work supervisor telling me, well, why can't custody just do this? And the lieutenant picking up on it, he went right back to the front line and said, and you're telling the civilians no, but she just pretty much said exactly what you could do to run it from a custody perspective. Now, mind you, from the civilian's perspective, that was 101. So now she doesn't trust the staff when the staff is saying, well, we can't do it. We can't do it. We can't do it. So when we're down and we're interacting with the front line, we want you involved. We want to know how can we make things better. But that really does come with you guys coming in and telling us, hey, Gange, I know we got to get this done. And I've been thinking we could do it this way, and this way. Because if we wanted obstacles, I wouldn't walk around. I wouldn't. If I just want people to be an obstacle, I wouldn't walk around, but when we want to have a solution, we want to work together. You walk around and everybody comes to the table, everybody's invested, and we get it done. Because I truly believe there's nothing we can't get done in corrections. I truly believe that. I do. I think that we have great minds. We're innovative. May not be the most efficient, but guess what, guys? Innovation and efficiency, they don't work together anyway, because we have to try and fail, and you have to allow for that. So I'd rather have my people be innovative than efficient. But with that said, listening to your front line and letting them give you the solutions, I want to go back down again. But if every time I go down, I got to get something pushed across to keep the facility moving, and all I get is obstacles, and even when I say, okay, I heard all your concerns, now what can we do to get it to work knowing these concerns? Well, I just don't know. Well, you know what? The sad thing is, all that does is stop the progress, and then it stops me from wanting to come down again. And guess what I start doing, guys? I start now managing the how. So think about it. Here I am going down. We know this is what we got to do. Let's empower. Let's push down the how. But if I get people that constantly want to be obstacles and never be the resource, and I start looking at things and figuring out from my own way, you know what? We're just going to do it this way, and this way. Well, Gangi, that's messed up because now you're doing it. Yeah, but no one helped me. Nobody wanted to give me an honest effort. So when I told you I have to carry it out, I went down, I tried to have the dialogue. You guys didn't want to have the dialogue. So now I'm going to implement it. And you're going to be mad. You're going to be mad because now Gangi's saying, yeah, but I went to the floor. I asked you guys multiple times. No one wanted to give me a solution, but it still had to get done. So now you're forcing me to lift the how because everybody wants to be an obstacle and not a resource. But again, I'm more familiar with officers and staff that they run on momentum. They want the how. They want to be empowered. They know the times that we're in, and they know that there's going to be a shift. There's an evolution. But with that said, for those that want to be obstacles just to be obstacles and vent just to vent, that doesn't stop the world from moving. And I thought I know both of you guys are going to probably want to respond to some of the stuff I said. So I'd like to go with Connie first and then Butch.
So I think the being intentional about our time is really important. And so setting boundaries for when a conversation is going left with no end, right? Like, I'm not going to give you 20 minutes to continue with this. Like, you know, at some point, I think maybe you get maybe 2 or 3 minutes. I'm going to try to hear you out, see what direction you're going. And then there's going to be a point where I just have to ask, like, so what would you like me to do with this information? Right? Like, I've always been very clear about things like that, just because, like, I feel like when you give the naysayer like the airtime, like, they take full advantage to have along. And sometimes, like, just being nice, you end up sitting listening and you know it's a waste of time. So I think when we are intentional about those rounds, about walking, and we set those boundaries, and we, you know, call stuff out in the moment too, because your time is valuable, right? Like, you could be doing other things, and it is sort of wasted when you're just kind of going through the motions with someone on something that has, like, they have no solution. But I think, you know, the other thing is we can also set the tone for that, right? Like, so when people come to us, like, it could also be known, right? Like, maybe the person coming can say, hey, listen, Ganj, I don't really know how we could fix this, but this is something that I see happens every shift, right? And maybe that creates the opportunity for us to have like a group think, like, how maybe we can troubleshoot this together. At least they see that there's a problem. It's important enough that they brought it up. They may not have the solution, but they want to come to some sort of resolve, right? Because I think that's a different conversation from the person who's just bringing you the problem and, like, they're just talking about it, as opposed to saying, like, I don't know how to fix this. Maybe you can help me fix it, which means they've already tapped into some sort of resource trying to fix it, but they've been unsuccessful and they're looking for you to help them out. So I think, you know, that's something to bear in mind as we do the rounds. And I guess the other thing that, you know, as you were talking, I was thinking about was, you know, many times we do want to empower the how, but we also have to be mindful that there are policies, procedures, post orders that might be instructing the staff to do something else, right? So I think we have to be intentional. I think Butch had mentioned, you know, there was a protocol, like if there was something that needed to be changed, a policy that needed to be changed, if it was in their power, they would change it. And I think sometimes we may want to empower the how, but if there's a policy or procedure or post order that says something otherwise, we also have to be mindful of that. So to the point of, so tell me what the policy says, I think is a really good way to redirect the staff. That way, before they come with you trying to empower them, at least they know what the policy says. And they could even say, hey, but Ganj, but the policy says we should do X, Y, Z. Right? Because now that's another conversation where we could be productive. Because I think that's the goal as we do these walking around. Like, we want to be productive. It's not just walking around just for the sake of, right? It's walking around with intention. And if there are things, these little fires that we could put out, you know, in those moments that don't become like the next code or the next whatever, like that's the for me anyway, like I see that to be the bigger goal for us doing these tours.
Yeah, and Connie, what you said is spot on. I just want to mention something too, because I agree, but I want to add something to that. So when we get something, they basically tell us this is what they want, and then it gets passed down, and then you get the policymakers that, you know, are okay. How are we going to make this work? You know, at both at an agency level and at an institutional level. So again, if you have more staff that are willing to step up and be a resource, the how is empowered in the policy because they helped invent it. You know, but when you get people that are surrounded that just want to be the obstacle, then yes, the policy probably won't be written in their best interest because, again, they weren't involved in it because they choose to step away. Now, mind you guys, remember the dialogue we're having right now, I just want to make sure is we did a dialogue on frontline, so don't forget to check that dialogue where what management can do to communicate better with frontline. This is the other side of the dialogue. So I don't want people to think that we're attacking one side, but this is the other side of the dialogue. So again, please check out the other video. But I want to mention something here, though, is that so if we're all involved, you can see the magic of a great policy because everybody was involved in the creation of it. I think it really becomes a concern when you get staff that are so resistant and we got to move. So it's like, hey, I don't got time for this. And I'm just going to go ahead and create the policy. Because mind you, I don't know how most facilities operate, but what you're going to have is you're going to get an idea that's going to come from above, however wild it's going to be, whatever. I mean, it is what it is. Then it's going to have to get filtered through the agency to make a generalized policy just to show we're implementing it at however many facilities are involved. But then each facility this is where the magic happens. Each facility should be empowered with the how of how they're going to implement the greater scale of this in their facility. So if you think about it, you do have the what being pushed down to the individualized facilities, where then the administrator goes by, talks to staff and say, hey guys, this is just passed. This is what we got to do. How can we make this happen? And then you can develop an institutional policy that's compliant with the bigger picture. Because really, to be honest with you, it's very rare, but it could happen, because you could have so many failures at something where policy will become a micromanaged attempt to make sure you get the job done. And we don't want to get to that point. That's why we got to always show that exhausted effort. But there are some times where policy gets mandated because they don't trust in our honest effort. Because at one point, maybe, they're telling us no, but we could have done it. And, that's why I always tell people, try to work with me, guys, because when I have to say a no, somebody can always go around me to check if that no is real. And if you sell me on something bullshit and it's not an exhausted effort, well, now I look stupid, but we all look stupid. And then you wind up starting to get people that, for liability's sake, when they start pushing down the policies, they're going to push down the how, because they don't trust us in doing it. But I will say this, when you do have that trust, you go to the table and you do your best to develop whatever plan you need for the institution to carry out this policy, and things work smooth. Now, if by chance you can't, you can show a list of why it won't work, and then maybe that can affect change from down to the top. But again, they have to believe in the effort. So you're right, Connie, 100%. If we don't get involved, or if they don't trust that when we say no, it's not on the back end of an exhausted attempt, they will legislate policy and micromanage the shit out of us. What's your thoughts on that?
I think I just wanted to add, so the staff have to understand that, so each facility, I've worked in, 10, 12 different facilities, right? Each facility has its own culture. It has its own layout. It has its own everything. And so when a policy or policy maker doesn't have the benefit of individuals who actually work in those facilities, who can see how, if we attempted to operationalize this thing, here's all the other things that could go wrong, right? I think that's what we have to kind of take ownership of as folks who work. This is going to directly impact my job. And if I don't say something, the person who's making the policy has no idea of this nuance that exists just in this facility, right? Whether you're working in a women's, a max security, a low level, they all have their own different nuances. And I just wanted to just raise that point, because all too often let me just stay out of it, right? Or they're not listening to us, so our voices don't matter. And that's simply just not the case. And so for the leaders who may be watching, it's understanding that we need to invite those voices to the table, so that when we're implementing all these wonderful things that we think should be happening in facilities, at least it has true relevance and it can be operationalized in a manner that doesn't compromise safety and security.
Yeah, and I love that, because that just complemented everything. It brought it to full circle. But I totally agree, Connie. And Butch, obviously you were at the higher up. You see how when they try to push something, I would like to think that they're going to trust in the institution and follow it out. But if they can't trust at a certain level, they will micromanage the hell out of it, because that's something that has to occur, correct?
So today I was thinking about evolution again. So even, how I remember how, I never really saw the warden come to my post, or, they didn't walk around. They didn't manage by walking around back then. And that's not a knock on anybody. That was a technique that, evolved over time, where people, a best practice, and people adopted it, and they're good at it now. But, I want to explain where so even back then, right, we had 21 facilities. They were the wardens were 21 powerful people. They ran their own facilities. They had limited interference, and I'll use interference, or limited direction from central office. Without technology, without email, way back in mid 80s. So the superintendents or the wardens were left to run their facility and had a lot of autonomy. That is no longer the case. In many agencies nationwide, central office is far more involved with the day-to-day operation of correctional facilities. And what's even more scarier is some of those people don't have the experience in prisons that is needed to make some of these policy decisions. So that's the challenge, right, Gange? That's the challenge. So, hopefully the agency has a process where they, when time permits, that's not always the case either. All of a sudden, legislation's passed, you get it on your desk at 5 and now it's law, but when time permits, there should be a process where policy changes are sent out for comment and then come back and then they discuss it and make changes if they have to or if they can. And then, they send out the policy as a written document, as an actual policy. Hopefully there's a process like that. Hopefully there's a policy that discusses policy, how policies develop, how changes to policies can be recommended with central office. There's got to be a formal process where folks can make a recommendation, excuse me, to make a change. And why? Agencies would be better off with a process like that because, the people on the ground are the ones that have to make it work. And if it can't work, it's going to be disruptive. And then, if it becomes disruptive in the facility, that's when we start to have friction. That's when, we could have inmate disturbances. One of the biggest one, Connie, is that, when I retired, I tell you, I wasn't going to miss Matt, medically assisted treatment. I'm going to tell you what, that was one of the greatest challenges of my career on how to get that, how to get people their medicine properly within the 24 hours in a day. But all that came from the legislation. That, I don't think there was a correctional expert involved with that decision-making process. But those are the challenges. And there needs to be an avenue for folks to officially, request changes or have an outlet to at least, discuss that with central office, whether it's the wardens, deputy wardens, even the union. Sometimes I used to give them hints, why don't you bring this to that level? This is something we need to change that we can't do at this level. And, if someone asked me, I'd say, yeah, I support it. That didn't happen often, but there were times I had to be careful with that. But, corrections has evolved now to where it's an agency. It's not 21 different, little facilities. We're all in it together now. I don't know if that's a good thing. I think it is. I think it's better if we're all on the same page. You transfer from one facility to the next. It's not like retraining or starting on day one. There's a lot of benefits that come from it, but and one other point I wanted to make was transparency. I used to have this speech a lot. I used to tell people, because that was the big thing, trying to be transparent. And what I know is we'll be as transparent as we can. There is some stuff that we're just not going to be able to share, and that there was some friction on that as well. But once they heard you say, be honest about it, it's going to be something I'm not going to discuss with you because I can't. Most of the time they understood.
Yeah, I think I want to get into one more thing before we kind of start to settle down. Is I think in the end, guys, is that as corrections evolves, one of the things that we're moving into is more of a collective effort. We're not trying to be more isolated. We're trying to actually bring everybody together, and then through safety and security and rehabilitation, see a real good partnership, and the product being an inmate who hopefully is more successful this time around when they get released. And I think that right now, all efforts should be leaning towards that. And the last thing that we want is for an agency to become so complex and so isolated that it actually winds up being more divisive, with everybody having their own agendas and no eyesight on what the bigger picture is. And, I'm just worried about my department and nobody else's. So I think what's great is when you have these discussions with your staff, if when you go to make a solution, or if there's a solution that doesn't work, it's your job to let them know the bigger picture. It's your job to make sure that they see how the decisions that they want to make are affecting those other departments, because sometimes people don't realize. I mean, going it for myself as an officer, I didn't see really the bigger picture until I crossed into admin and kind of had a little bit more of a bird's eye view, because again, when you as an officer, you can be very departmentalized, and it's like, hey, this is my job, I got to get it done. But you may be so focused on what you have to do to get done that, unless you have a good supervisor explaining to you what you just did affects these other areas, and constantly reminding you of your, what we call task significance, how your task relates to, the overall picture, or how your mission connects to the vision, you wind up just having people that just do their individualized functions without realizing how their function truly connects with the other departments. So I think part of it now is, when we have concerns that do relate to the bigger pictures, to bring people to the table and let's all talk about what it is that we have to solve. And it'll be unique where, even as management, sometimes you go to solve an issue and all of a sudden you're surprised by a department that is also involved in that you didn't think of. It's like, oh, here you are trying to solve this issue, and thank God I brought all the department heads to discuss it. And here I am thinking this issue was only really between medical and custody, but now classification's got an issue and it's related to that. And it's like, oh my God, I wouldn't have thought about that, but that's why it's good to have those department head meetings, and that's your chance to address the concerns at every level. And we love it when we're able to have that dialogue and all the department heads kind of settle it without having to go to admin, because you guys really are the experts. You guys are really the ones that know how to facilitate, what it is that you need. We just have the authority to make the departments work together. I want you guys to realize that that's our job, is if you didn't have administration, you would have all the departments doing their individualized function, because again, that's their main concern. They work for these departments. They have to fulfill those needs. Administration's job technically is to bring it together. How do we bring it together? And then we, if need be, have the authority to make decisions where one department may have to compromise and the other department may be able to get I don't like to say a win-loss, because it's not. We all benefit when we move forward, but technically it's, one department may be able to have a little more say in this because they're a little bit more invested in what that outcome is. I mean, my effort always is to try to build an understanding between the different departments. And let's say, hey, sometimes custody is the priority on this one. So everybody at this table, we have to work around what custody needs to get this done. But sometimes it could be a goal for social services. So now you have everybody at the table. It's like, hey, guys, this one's about social services. How do we work together to get social services to get the win on this one? Or medical with the Medline. It's like, hey, guys, I get it. We have concerns, but the Medline still has to be run. So when we do this discussion, how do we do it through the eyes of medical, not through the eyes of just custody? Yes, custody is the template. Hear me out, but we have to get the job done. So I want to look at it through medical's eyes so we can understand the importance of what it is that they have to try to accomplish. And then we can go ahead and figure out what we can do to aid them and not violate any safety and security concerns. Because the last thing we want, guys, is for people to use safety and security as an excuse not to move at all. And and we don't want that, So again, I think it was interesting. I think this dialogue just kind of opens up from the other perspective where, this is what we have to do if we want to talk to management, what we have to understand. Again, this partners the dialogue from a couple of days ago where management's got to listen to frontline 100%. This is more about what we can do to build that bridge. And there's a lot more things we can cover here. But again, this is a discussion that could pretty much go on forever. Just through the sharing of experiences. Hey, but do you have anything you'd like to say in closing?
No, I think we touched it all. Like you said, we could talk for hours on this, but it's very complex, very difficult, very it's a very demanding job. And really, once you make it to a certain level, this is really all it's about is getting the message out and getting folks to do what needs to be done. And then, hopefully they come up with the how, and you set parameters for the how. There's still boundaries, and, there's still parameters that got to be followed. But, really, once you make it to a certain level, this is what it's all about. And it's difficult to get everyone to, get on the same page. But once you do, once the institution is moving forward, it's rather rewarding. It can be very rewarding when it works.
You're muted.
I caught it. I caught it, but my finger wasn't fast enough. So I want the world to know I caught it, but my finger wasn't fast enough. And Connie knew that. And she used that to her own advantage to go ahead and say, because I have small fingers.
I just didn't want you to start talking for a long time and then we miss out your whole statement.
No, because guys, I have small hands. I had to move the chair up to get to the mic. And she knows that. She knows my fingers are small. God. Look at them. They're small. So thanks, Connie. I live with this, Connie, every day. Hey, guys, by the way, rough week, guys. Before we go to Connie's closing, guys, I want to do another live, so I'm looking forward to Connie's discussion. But I want to try to maybe do something this weekend. But I've been having training that's about 2 hours away and 2 hours back. And then I got rear-ended the other day driving. I was stopped in a car, took responsibility, but they slammed into the back of my car, which pushed me into the other car. I'll show you pictures. It wasn't a friendly love tap either. But let me show you the picture here. I'll show you the back of the vehicle. So now this is my 2010 Honda Accord. Yeah, guys, this is what I fucking drive. So the front isn't that bad, but that's where I kind of hit the other car, but they hit me from the back. So this is the side of it. And then you'll see the back.
Yeah,
they got me good, and I got a nice little bruise on my arm.
And he did not go and get medical care, and he knows he should go get medical care, right? Because the trauma to the body is just that. It will show up, and your body will be aching you, not just your arm.
Eventually.
Yeah. No, she's right. And I thought because they ask you, it's optional, so it's not that important. But then, of course, Connie, went right into why didn't you go see medical? And she's right, because my wife said the same thing. So did the people I work with. But I'm also I feel fine. They gave you up to 36 hours. I'm not one, my car got messed up pretty bad. So I'm obviously insurance is covering it, but I'm not one oh my back, but as I said, you're right. I feel fine, so
you feel fine now, but in an accident, there are multiple traumas that happen. So it's internal organs that there's the trauma. There's what you see on the outside. And then there's your body, aside from the car, right? What happened to the car, there's all that happens within your body when there's an accident, just so you know. So I'm not going to stop bugging you about going to see someone because they hit you hard enough that you hit your head.
I did hit my head, yeah.
Right.
Hey, but Connie, what you talked about organs on the inside, sometimes you don't pick up my call and it breaks my heart. And, what's funny?
Oh my God, I can't take it.
They don't.
I don't pick up his call one time. I actually said that today. Today I'm walking up. I was like, you didn't get to talk to Gangi yesterday. All because why? I was dealing with my daughter, right? So he calls, and please know everyone, we talk literally probably every day. Literally. And so the one day that I was not able to pick up, it's now on the show. Look at this. Oh my God.
My heart is broken. And guys, I was depressed.
Oh boy.
No, it was. My wife's like, what's going on? What's wrong? And
that's all right. I talked to your wife yesterday though.
Well, wait, what? Wait, what? What was that about? Oh, that's because we're gonna see you soon.
Yes.
We're gonna go do the July. But I want Connie to know when she breaks my heart, I take it out on the family. So no, just don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. It's only 2 kids. They're 9 and 5. They'll get over it when they're older, and daddy's just depressed all the time.
Oh my God, whatever.
Yeah. Listen, guys, I don't even drink, but because Connie doesn't answer my calls,
water.
It is.
Or
it's also
coffee.
water. But Connie, I'm in a fantasy right now.
Oh boy,
a fantasy of depression.
Butch is saying it's time to go, Gangi.
Hey guys, depression. This may help me sleep. Hey Connie, you got a closing thought. Can I get your closing thought?
Oh my God. What's my closing thought? Listen, we have to work together in facilities, period. Like, I don't think there's any way around that, right? So being available as a leader, it matters. And knowing how to approach your leader, if in fact there is something of importance going on in your respective area of responsibility that you want your leader to know about, right? Like, there's ways to make sure that that message gets there and that things don't get lost in translation, right? Like, it matters that if it's of significance, that you've made the time to actually speak with the leader, not when they're just walking around, because that's most likely not the appropriate time to deal with something that's of importance. But also just being, I guess, intentional about your airtime with anyone in leadership, right? Like, if you've got a moment, you've crossed, you've got something of importance to talk about, just make sure that you make the most of that time. That way that they can be the best resource to you.
That's powerful, because in Maxwell's 360 leadership, he mentions that we have to have value for each other's time. And, you got to be weird. The leaders, when they're coming down, obviously we're not saying they're gods, because that's not the case. They are driven by those interactions with the people they supervise. But again, you have to be wary. They could supervise, like in my case, we have 800 employees. I'm trying to get to as many as I could. So we want to have productive dialogue, because I don't want to take away from someone else who may have something real. So we want to make sure that we do have that good dialogue. And guys, before I close, I want to say one thing. This dialogue, however uncomfortable, because it shouldn't be uncomfortable, has to happen. We can't live on assumptions and automatically assume that we're working for bad people. And then it's like, well, have you ever spoken to them? No, but they're just an asshole because Connie said they're an asshole. And it's like, guys, we really start to have these dialogues and not be afraid to have discussions like this, because in the end, if we don't, we wind up working in a world of assumptions, and assumptions are very divisive, because it's easier to assume the bad in somebody than the good, especially in corrections. We're so used to that, what Connie said before, the generalized animosity. But the best way to get rid of generalized animosity is to talk to somebody. Hey, I'm having a problem with admin. No, you're having a problem with Butch. Sorry, Butch. I'm having a problem with medical. No, you have a problem with Connie. Or I'm having a problem with admin. No, you're having a problem with Gangi. I mean, it's easier to do the generalized animosity than actually just to go up and say, hey, can we discuss this? So we can try to listen. This is my closing thought. The facility always wants to go back to isolation and division, because that seems to be the norm. So every day we have to fight that. When we feel that we're starting to isolate ourselves or divide, then we got to get involved and play our role to bring people together. And that's our active involvement. And that's not just from management. That's from everybody at every level. So the moment we start having that generalized animosity, another department head meeting, let's see what's going on, and just keep things moving forward collectively. As always, guys, the show is Tear Up. If you haven't, please subscribe, interact, engage, comment, hit that bell. Bell's going to notify you every time I post up a video. Connie, pick up the phone when I call. And everybody be safe. Take care. Love you. God bless.